online.
Okay, good.
Philip, Susan, and Marcia,
Gotcha.
and maybe others. And Rachel, what system do we want to use for public comment today? Do we have a sign-up sheet? Yes. Or we can create one.
Are we having people sign up for public comment, both on paper and through the app?
So, yes, so for people who are obligated to paper, so that they can sign up.
Here's piece of paper. It's public comment sign up. Great.
So if anyone wants to comment for public comment, I'll lay it right here. And yes, anybody online, they can indicate if they're wanting to, we'll let you know.
Great. Are we ready to go?
10 seconds.
Oh, great. Okay. Awesome. We're good? Okay, great. Welcome everyone to our December Early Childhood Education and Development Committee meeting. We are in a hybrid mode right now. So we have both committee members and community members who are here with us in person and also online. So let me just go over a few quick housekeeping items, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the agenda. But again, just a welcome to everyone. And do we need to do our votes by roll call because we have online members?
Because it's hybrid, that's probably a good idea.
Okay, so we'll do our votes by roll call today. We'll also do attendance by roll call in just a moment. For members of the community, if you are interested in speaking during public comment, which will happen at the end of the meeting, there's a piece of paper that you can sign up on. Please go ahead and do that. Thank you, Peppy. If you are joining us online and would like to participate in public comment, please indicate that in the chat function, and we'll keep track of that. We are so thrilled today to be welcoming our friends from Buncombe Partnership for Children for their annual visit to this committee to provide a sort of state of the union address on early childhood education, all things early childhood education in Buncombe County. And we're so grateful to you all for the work and effort that you put into preparing for this. And that really will be the heart of our meeting today. So we will get through our agenda items and be able to turn things over to them by about the 1:20 mark. And we'll have a presentation and time for discussion and then time for public comment on the other side of that. I'm also excited to take a moment to recognize and introduce a new member of our committee. Welcome Commissioner Martin Moore, both to Buncombe County Commission and to the Early Childhood Commission, serving in the Commissioner slot here on the committee. And Martin, if there's anything you'd like to say.
Honored to join you guys and just a big fan of the work that you've already done. So look forward to participating.
And last night we told Martin we were thrilled to welcome him to the best committee in Buncombe County. So I know we will all live up to that. I think with that we can go ahead and turn things over to Rich to do a
I
roll
don't
call.
have my roll call sheet.
We can probably approximate it.
Not a problem. I've got the website if you want me to.
Oh, I can probably pull that up. I did not anticipate. I'm so overjoyed that we're now in person.
I know. Just threw it out the window. Yeah.
See if I can find it.
I've got you if you want.
Okay. Will you call it?
I'd be happy to.
Please, thank you. I defer to Rachel.
So as listed on the website, Jasmine Beach Ferrara, here.
Here.
All Whitesides. Kit Kramer. Here. Philip Belcher.
Here.
Misty Rising Cogbill. Here. Susan Mims,
Here.
Marcia Davis,
Here.
Wendy Weaver. Here. Rich Johnson,
I'm here.
Linda McDaniel,
Here.
Leslie Anderson, Randy Bowmans, Mark Paff, Carol Steen. Here.
Thank you, Rachel.
Great. And our first item of business is review and approval of minutes for our November 1st meeting. So we'll take a motion on the floor whenever folks are ready.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Sorry, I already messed it up.
You don't have to do by roll call vote anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Great, okay. All those in
Good
favor.
reason to have the attorney
Thank
in the
you.
room.
Thank you, Michael Brew. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are passed. We'll turn our attention now to old business and turn things over to staff to walk us through those items.
Thank you for the discussion coming out, the post-grant cycle reflection, and then in the November meeting, the discussion about getting ready for the new grant cycle. Staff sent an email to the committee with the materials for today's meeting and a bit of explanation about the updates. The application was updated to reflect the changes that came from this group. Many of those were minor wording changes that didn't substantively change the overall application. There were a couple of edits between last cycle and this that our applicants will notice where things are reworded. An example of that is the equity question, where we have been more clear about the county's definition of equity. I offer that in the way of reminder. The item that I wanted to specifically call out is related to the scoring criteria. So we shared in the email that Buncombe County staff is recommending to this committee to utilize the rubric that we sent out and I have included in this meeting packet. Essentially, what that rubric does is provides narrative descriptions of each of the 5 points on the rating scale. So there are 6 criteria, that doesn't change, and 5 points available for those criteria, that doesn't change. What it does is offers a little bit more guidance and direction and anchoring information to the reviewer, that's you, when you go into the grant software and evaluate and assign points. And it offers more information to the grantee when they're preparing their applications. And the feedback we heard is, what does good look like for some of these? Hopefully these explanations are concise and straightforward, so as not to limit us too much, but give some more clarity about what a higher value versus a lower scoring response would look like. So we bring those forward as the drafts. You'll remember from the schedule that we are hoping to, or planning to release the call for applications Monday after next, so December 19th, and it will be open until mid-February. I think February 10th is the deadline when the nonprofits or the organizations will submit their applications, and then the committee will move on into the review phase. So nothing specifically to decide today, but sharing that update and sharing that plan and open to questions or comments. Very good, thank you. So our newest committee member, we look forward, we'll reach out and do an orientation with you and kind of give you an overview of the A to Z so you feel ready as we head into the next grant cycle.
Is there anything we need to check in about, Rachel, around the site visits?
Oh, did I skip right past it?
That's okay.
Site visits. Do you have information, Angelina, about how many are still remaining?
3.
3 remain. Thank you. It is a lot of time commitment to participate in site visits. The feedback we've been hearing, particularly from the committee members, is that those are really valuable learning opportunities to deepen knowledge, deepen relationships. We have some thank you cards that we've brought home from some of our site visits from Evolve Early Learning and from Vet Creek. These are thank you notes drawn. I'll narratively describe them for the people online, but thank you notes from the kids that participate in these early learning programs. So we know that's a lot of work. Thank you for participating in those. There are still a few left to sign up for if you want. And it is helpful for you to do those post visit surveys, because that gives a way to capture your thoughts and feedback and share it with others within the community.
Any reflections from committee members on recent site visits?
Jasmine, there's one topic that I want to bring up that could also impact the application. This was a visit at First Incorporated, paying attention to about the Sunshine Project, and they shared with us a topic having to do with expulsion of preschoolers. And I think when was at that meeting as well, they were talking about how in some situations, a 2-year-old bites 3 times could be removed from the center. And that got me thinking about the issue of, and they in fact referred to it as preschool to prison pipeline. And, which got me thinking about the issue of equity and what's happening in our preschools around discipline and expulsion in particular. But so that, again, as I was looking at the application, made me think about, not doing anything about it, but sort of gathering information. And I thought within that equity subsection, it might make sense for us to add a question about, what policies, if any, do you have around discipline and specifically expulsion? Just so we begin to get an idea of what's out there. Because it obviously, I'm sure, concerns all of us to think of a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, or even a 5-year-old being expelled from, a setting that young. And, then it raises all the other questions about, what are the demographics of that, et cetera. So I just put that out there for us to really think about.
Yeah, and for something that's developmentally appropriate.
Right. And that's what they pointed out also, that a 2-year-old biting is not, something inappropriate necessarily.
Right, especially if you're in a very small space with a lot of other people bumping into you.
Right.
The expulsion rate is overwhelmingly focused on, African-American male children as well. So, when you're talking about equity, it would be interesting too to consider if that's maybe something, that's a little more in-depth question. And I just wonder relationally if that is served well when we go out on our site visits as well.
This is Philip, and I would suggest no. That's not a question that you're going to get a meaningful answer to talking one-on-one. I think somebody like the Buncombe Partnership for Children, who has information across the board, would be useful. But I think it would raise a lot more concerns if we're trying to base some kind of decision making on what individuals are seeing at individual site visits.
It could be interesting to track though and get and develop some, I don't know if Buncombe Partnership for Children maybe we will already have this, but advice for parents who have a biter I mean, there are just so many kid issues that parents face, and they're being a parent for the first time, and they don't want their children to fight, but they could use help, not expulsion, but help and understanding what to do. So I think that's really interesting that that was observed, and I do think we need to think through it and maybe encourage some kind of, I don't know, what training for parents.
Well, Buncombe Partnership just finished a training for parents and had a group come through, so that might be I'm just saying. I didn't discuss.
And if what you said, Misty, is correct, and I understand that it is that African-American males are disproportionately affected by suspension rates, and that is obviously an equity flag and something that, and especially when we're looking at places and we don't, I mean, that's some of the idea of understanding what the demographics of the staff are versus who they're serving. I think all that stuff sort of rolls in together.
I know my experience in K-12 education, excuse me, that there was a big correlation between African-American males and expulsions. In large part, the theory is that you've got teachers who are coming from a middle-class background, working with kids who are from a lower socioeconomic background. And so the rules are different depending upon, Ruby Payne was a person, and I don't even know if she's still working, but she used to talk about the different, the rules of living in poverty, the rules of living in middle class, and rules in upper class types of, and trained teachers wanted teachers to understand what those rules were for poverty, to have a better understanding of where the little kids are coming from and where their parents are coming from. And on the whole, I'm for offering more education for parents.
I think there needs to be education.
I think there's, I wanted to chime in on from Zoom. This is Marcia. I think, there's got to be a distinction in the conversation between, are these systems level issues or are these individual level issues? And, when we're talking about a child biting, that's not a socioeconomic, that doesn't come up just because based on socioeconomic status or racial or ethnicity. That's a thing that toddlers do. And the question becomes, what's the systems level response to that? And whether or not expulsion makes sense in an early childhood education setting, which, most updated data at this point says it does not, right? It's not a developmentally appropriate intervention. So I think that's something for us to keep in mind. But my question, as a newer member of the committee is what's the purview of the committee? I think there are actually some wonderful advocacy groups locally. I think folks have brought up the partnership as an option, but the question for me is whether or not recommendations are to link up with community partners who are already doing this work, as opposed to asking another question on our application, is whether or not, I guess I'd need some clarity about what we've seen historically to actually be a more powerful, strategic lever for us.
Thank you, Marcia. Did you have a chance to finish your comment?
I was just thinking that because of the lack of staff and the frustration level in centers, they are not, and the lack of training for teachers also is a big issue, I think.
I think maybe to try to sort of tie some of this up, partly because we're keeping an eye on the clock. This feels to me like one of those areas where there might be some opportunities for first to learn more about the landscape, but then to think about whether there are some technical assistance or training or resource opportunities that might already exist, and or the committee might have an opportunity to support or at least be aware of or make grantees aware of. So maybe we could flag this for some future discussion, and also invite partners to share resources that they're aware of, and we could maybe develop sort of a toolkit of resources for grantees around particularly equity issues, including but not limited to disciplinary issues. Does that sound like an okay set of next steps for folks? Thanks for raising that issue, Mark.
On a slightly different subject, I don't know if now is the time to bring this up, but I sent Rachel a note when I was perusing this stuff and was thinking from a philosophical perspective, from this committee's perspective, our focus on 3 and 4-year-olds versus infants and up through age 2. I mean, I think the brain research is pretty compelling about what happens at the very, very beginning. And I think we have a tendency to think, well, we're going to bite one, take one mouthful of the elephant at a time. I just fear if we wait, we're going to be waiting a long time before we begin to focus on those infants and toddlers. And I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but I'd like to, when we're thinking about what our strategic focus might be related to the grants, I'd like to see some enhanced focus on those earliest days. So I'm just one person, just wanted to bring that up. Right there with you.
Thank you for sharing that, and I think all of that will to be continued as we head into this year's cycle for sure. We are now going to, we got through some reflection on site visits. I think we could go very deep on everything that's been raised. Got through the application, and now I'm very excited to turn the mic over to Buncombe Partnership for Children. They have a prepared presentation, and then we will open it up for discussion, and we will, in about an hour, need to wrap up both pieces of that so we have time for public comment. And thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you all for having us. And I apologize for jumping in and out and coughing. I'm on the tail end of something. I promise I'm not bringing you germs. So we're going to talk about kind of what's happening right now, right? What we see in our work across several different funded projects, what we see in our work both in child care resources and in workforce development and in the ARPA funded pre-K expansion project, just across lots of different things that we are doing at the partnership. We're going to focus on facilities, right? Exactly what's happening, what's available. It's right there. I don't have to look behind me. It's over there. All right. What's happening with the workforce, right? What we're seeing, and then funding, right? And kind of start thinking about some creative solutions, tell you what's happening, and we will try to stop talking in time to have questions. So if you go to the next slide, we are probably familiar to most of you, but my name is Jenny Weil. I'm the director of Child Care Resources. So I work with the Child Care Resources team that's training, technical assistance, coaching with early educators across the county, and also business startup, pretty much anything that is related to early care and education and child care. We can help support it in Child Care Resources. I also work with the workforce development program, which is funded by you all as other partners, and also work with a piece of the new ARPA funded pre-K expansion, the higher education support that Deanna's going to talk about a little bit later.
And I'm Deanna Lamott. I am now the NC pre-K expansion director. Was previously, my title was the early childhood systems coordinator, with work largely funded by this committee. So it's great to be here.
All right, so if you go to the next slide, I'm going to start with something that we've been bringing to this committee since you began, but also to the county for years, which is a report that comes out quarterly. It's on our website. I'm pretty sure it was included with your packet, a link to it, just called the State of Child Care in Buncombe County. We are not going to go through the whole thing because it is dense and there is a ton of information there. Again, updated quarterly from a wide variety of sources. You don't have to go hunt it down yourself. Yes, thank you for showing it. We do have a couple slides pulled from it for today, but definitely takes some time if you're not familiar with it to look in there, see what's there. Myself, my team, Caroline, we are all available to help translate it into real life and what this means on the ground. But that is there. What else? Yeah, all right, so if you'll go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that we look at, that we've tracked kind of over time in that report, is just number of children in care by type of facility. So don't worry, we're gonna go to another slide that is slightly easier to read. So don't worry about this one too much in terms of the numbers, but just for the overall snapshot. Right, what we're looking at is children, this is enrollment, this is not slots, right? So the other slots, so this is actual enrollment over time. The first date is 2005 all the way to 2020. So if you'll just look at the overall trend, right, it kind of goes up and down, but you see the clear downshift, right, at the beginning of or since the pandemic beginning. The other thing I want to look at on this slide is at the very bottom. So the top is childcare centers, right? The top line, the blue lines, is childcare centers. The greenish line on the bottom is family childcare homes, which, refresher, family childcare homes is a special type of license by the Division of Child Development and Early Education. It's 5 preschool children, so 0 to 5, and then they can have 3 additional school-age children if they want. A lot of infants and toddlers are served this way. So looking back, 2005, we had 230 children enrolled in family childcare homes in Buncombe County. And in 2022, we had 55, right? So we think, oh, family childcare home closed, right? Oh, there's 5 slots, but that's 175 kids. And we don't know, we could figure it out, but how many, but largely infants and toddlers, right? A lot of 1- and 2-year-olds being served in family childcare homes historically. So just kind of when we're looking at loss of slots in our extra crisis when it comes to infants and toddlers, this is just, I just like to kind of wave the flag that this is a piece of it. For sure. All right, we'll go to the next slide. We can see what's going on a little bit easier. Okay, this is the same data from the top blue line from the slide before. This is enrollment and licensed facilities. These are only 0 to 5. This is not in the next slide. We're going to look at school age data as well, because it's kind of combined in a lot of our data sources, but this is just 0 to 5. And so what we're seeing, right, is this decline since the pandemic. Right, and some of this is just families figuring out other alternatives, right? Pulling their children out, having them, like my own child, right? She's almost 5. She was 2 at the beginning of the pandemic. She just turned 3 at the beginning of the pandemic, right? We pulled her out because we had an option, because my mom could watch her, right? So there's no one, and we all have stories like that, right? She's now back in preschool, right? So there's lots of these individual stories out there of why this has gone down, right? I'm about to go into talking about workforce, because we know, right? We know that the availability of teachers is a huge piece of it. But keep in mind that that's not the whole story, right? There's probably a lot of children like mine who came out in 2020 and they go back and, ooh, wait a minute, is there a slot, right? Is there a place? Is it close to home? Is it all of that? So thinking about data only gives us a little piece of it. I'm giving you what we know. All right, so workforce. Who is with these children? If you will go to the next slide. Okay. So we know that enrollment has continued to be low, right, since the pandemic. So what we've got is February 2020, May 2020, and then September 2022. So the first line is just children enrolled. We've got 14% decline. The next one is facilities. Now we only lost a couple of programs in Buncombe County. And the middle line, the May 20 line, is because many programs were closed. Right, that's why that number drops to 54. So what we're really looking at is the difference between 113 and 111. And honestly, in Buncombe County, one of those was a planned retirement of a family childcare home. She was always going to retire. And another one was a very small program that I think it was 20 slots. And that was kind of also possibly going to happen anyway. So in Buncombe County, honestly, like the rest of the state, the issue has not been actual programs closing. It has been how many slots are available for children within those programs. All right, so because this is where the kicker is the bottom line. So we're looking at staff. Now these numbers include administrative staff, support staff, and teachers.
Like long-term subs.
Long-term subs, anybody employed by the program is what this number includes. The next slide will break it down a little bit more. But so going from 977 in February 2020 to 822 now, right? It's a 16% decline, which is why you're hearing so much about, well, this center, but they've got 2 closed classrooms, right? Because they're just not able to hire. So looking at facilities doesn't show the whole, show the whole picture. All right, so if you'll go to the next slide. I don't remember when we started talking. You've got a timer.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So this is that final number kind of broken down by the type of employee, right? So of that 822, 699 are teachers, 100 of those are administrators, and about 33 are support staff. And so in the support staff line is really important because that's where we're seeing a lot of loss. Because think about it, if you've got a floater, right, a teacher who goes to give breaks from classroom to classroom to classroom, but that person has had to be pulled in to a classroom full time, right, then suddenly teachers aren't getting breaks when they need them. And suddenly the director is giving breaks. And then everybody's really tired. And then it just kind of spirals, right? The directors in the room are like, Y'all, the number of times I have seen Marcia with holding a baby in a meeting, right? I mean, which I know is lovely also, but it's happening across the board, right? So thinking about those support staff, which seem like a very small number, but especially in larger centers, those long-term subs or even short-term subs, right? Temporary substitutes or the floater or the assistant director who can be really flexible and do lots of different things are super important. And a lot of those people are spending a lot of time in classrooms right now. So if we're thinking about overall, right? Like there are lots of factors that go into where the teachers, what does recruitment look like? What does retention look like? What are all those things? And one of the major pieces, right, is of course is how much are they getting paid, right? What is compensation? What does that look like? So these are some baseline numbers from 2019. Which was the last statewide kind of big look at data at some things like how much the other pieces here, right? Who's getting wages, who's getting some of those other salary supplement supports. So for example, the average hourly wage, right, for a teacher in 2019 was $13.37. So we're gonna come back to that in just a minute. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so stabilization grants, these are recovery dollars from the federal recovery dollars that are being funneled through the Division of Child Development and are coming directly to programs, right? These started in fall 2021. They're continuing in some form through next year. The last full payment, which actually isn't even a full payment, is in January, and then the compensation pieces will continue through December. There'll be 3 more payments for the compensation section. But a huge amount of money coming into Buncombe County, right? This is directly from the Division of Child Development's data dashboard. You kind of click around all the different counties and see. But so in total, $15 million. And this isn't actually, this is as of right now. This is as of the last payment. So this does not include what is still coming in 2023. This is to date. By quarter. So programs got an amount and they had to opt in, right? They did have to apply. And across the state, about 93% of programs opted in to at least the compensation. At least the fixed cost base part. There were some programs that said, for various reasons, that said they couldn't, like locally, right? Like if they're receiving ARPA funds in other ways, you couldn't get it, right? So Mission, Head Start, like there were different pieces where they were not eligible for it because they were getting funds from the same pot in a different way. So there's basically huge amounts of money that are coming in that are going to go away next year. So my point is that even in light of this, even in light of this money coming in, right? So even if we just take 4.6 million going directly to teachers, those are compensation support. So mostly those are coming in the form of salary supplements, or they're coming in the form of some programs locally that did bonuses, they had the option, and a few are using it for other benefits, but most it is just directly going into the teacher's paycheck. So one example of what has been happening is a program locally, 5 stars, central part of the county. They had 9 classrooms pre-pandemic. They're operating 7 now. Before the stabilization grants came out, they figured out how to add $3 an hour to their teacher wages because they were trying to hire more, right? Stabilization grants came and they worked it out that they used some of their base and the compensation to add almost $4 an hour more to their pay, right? So their teachers they're getting temporarily, right, $7 more an hour, and they still cannot recruit for those 2 classrooms, right? And if I had come I keep saying this, but 3 years ago, come here and said, Jenny, how are we going to fix it? Like, how are we going to recruit teachers? How are we going to get them? Well, what if you gave everybody a $7 raise an hour? And like, done, right? And it's not. So what else is happening, right? It's the systemic pieces. It's what are those, you all have been talking about it, right? It's what are those teacher supports? It's how stressful is the classroom? Because I haven't gotten a break today. It's where is my child in childcare? It's the program that's trying to hire me all the way across the county and I can't get there, right? It's all of those other pieces that I think is another, and you all know, you've said it, right? Of like, what else we need to work on? And the money is going away is the other piece. Okay, so one more tiny thing and I'm gonna let Deanna talk. If you'll go to the next slide, it's not a tiny thing. Oh, there's more subsidy money. So the subsidy reimbursement rates went up officially in October, although it's retroactive to July. This is a big deal for programs that have a lot of subsidy, because often a lot of children receiving childcare subsidy vouchers, because it kind of is across the board. Some programs don't charge the parent the difference between that rate and if they have a higher private pay rate, some do, but either way, monthly, more money is coming in. The other place that, and I think this whole spreadsheet was shared with you, where we've got it here. And if you're looking at that, the other place to really see that there's been a big difference is that the school age rates went up by almost $200 across the board, which is great because one problem locally is that school age care, we have a lot of unlicensed school age care, which is fine. They don't need to have a license, but if you have a childcare voucher and you're a parent, you have to go to a licensed program, which is good. But we're hoping that this will encourage more of those programs to operate with a license, because some could do it either way. So we'll see. What am I missing? Oh yeah. So the other piece of kind of what, so if you'll go to the next slide. So that's kind of the current financial picture, right? Current financial picture as is related to just to compensation and to kind of basic funding for programs. So there's already some things happening, right, that you all know about, but that are happening in Buncombe County, right? So one is our workforce development program that right, bringing people in, getting them all of the pre-service training that they need, doing mentorship and hands-on learning as they go out. They can enter into working in a sub pool, right? So also trying to get at providing substitutes that are so needed. And then as they go into full-time jobs, how can we support them? How can we support kind of that entry into something that came up at our site visit was, well, wait a minute, they're only getting 24 hours of training? Yeah, but that's 8 more than is required by the state, right? I mean, that's kind of the fundamental time at teacher training, right? It's kind of the fundamental thing is that you can hire a brand new person with no education or no anything, no experience whatsoever, give them 16 hours of basically like bloodborne pathogens and how do you wash your hands and kind of some basic safety training and put them in a classroom with kids legally, right? Most programs don't do this, but legally you can. And so there's some kind of huge systems pieces to look at and overcome, which is why we do so much training partnership. And then also Deanna's going to talk about the higher education coaching that is a part of our funding. Next. That's it. All right.
So if you can go to the next slide. So Jenny gave you a little bit of the data just for the context of the county, looking at everything mostly 0 to 5, and ended with that focus on here's a local solution that the partnership has been working on for a couple of years with the workforce development program. There's another big local solution, right? Another big set of strategies that largely came out of the work of this committee, and then you all recommended it to be funded to the commissioners with ARPA funds, and that's this building capacity in Buncombe County to expand NC pre-K availability and accessibility. It just rolls right off the tongue. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Not a comprehensive update because we don't have time, but hitting on some of the things that we can celebrate now, basically kind of 4 months into the school year, and some things to be aware of as funders and as community members around what's happening here. You can go to the next slide, that'd be great. Many of you have seen this slide many times, I apologize, but this is kind of how we've laid out what the strategies are. Just a quick reminder, the 3 big goals at the top, we're hoping, over the long term, to increase kindergarten readiness, expand access to pre-K across the county, and then reduce racial disparities in those child outcomes. We have the top 3 strategies are really focused on barriers that providers experience and providing NC pre-K. And then the bottom ones are barriers that families experience in trying to access the program. So I'm going to talk just about 3 of these today, the 3 that we're currently implementing. Then the other 3 are going to roll out in the spring and summer. The first one, if you click, is this fully funded NC pre-K. This strategy is by far takes the biggest bulk of the funding that we are receiving through this ARPA grant. And it's mostly just giving more money to those NC pre-K providers, because we know from a 2017, I think, state report, the state, a report at the state level said the state funds about 60% of what it costs to offer this program. So, the first thing that providers said when we said, what would it take to make this a more appealing program to provide? Like, fund it. So we're not having to, find other funding sources, write grants and stuff just to do the basic program. We also, another thing that providers said that we wrote into this project is to require K-12 pay parity for these licensed teachers. NC pre-K has a licensed teacher. This has the same exact license as a kindergarten teacher. Many of our NC pre-K teachers last year could have gone and taken a job in kindergarten and made like $10,000 more. I mean, it was ridiculous. the pay disparities for the same exact license and a lot of the same requirements. And then the third piece is just some extra classroom supports that we've added. So we get in the next slide. I want to give this group an opportunity to celebrate something that is an immediate impact of this program. I do want to point out this number at the bottom, average increase. It's a different number than what you have, because we found one error in the stuff that the monitor person did for us and taking all the pay information. So it's a slightly different number. But I want you all to be able to celebrate today that every single NC pre-K teacher in our county got a raise this year. That's huge. Right? Like over half of them, we're looking at the number of teachers who were you taught last year in an NC pre-K classroom and continue to teach this year. Half of those people, the raise was over 20%. 5 of them got a raise of over 40%. The average increase in their paycheck, their take-home paycheck, was almost $800 a month. So usually it was more significant for the more experienced teachers, which is wonderful, because we need to send the message that your 15 years of experience working with kids this age is valuable, and we want to keep you here. So next slide, please. I do want to point out, because you all are funders and wrestling with some of this hard stuff, that, oh, I think, go back one, did we miss one? There should be another slide, yeah. So I want to point out, there are some real challenges with this kind of strategy, because a lot of the things really focus on the fact that we're doing this salary kind of implementation at the NC pre-K program level, but that's often one or two classrooms that live within a bigger center or a bigger, program with other kinds of things going on. And so we've heard from several directors, and we knew that this was going to happen. We heard from several directors who said, my NC pre-K teacher makes more than I do now. We've also, there's another teacher here who's been teaching for 15 years, and she's excellent, but she's not an NC pre-K, and so now she's making $10,000 less than this person. So I mean, those are real challenges at the center level that they're navigating. We also wanted to require a higher living wage. Living wage bumped up a lot this year. Salary or per hour rate. And we also got some conversation with centers who just said, like, putting that at 1770 again, because it's just that assistant teacher in that NC pre-K classroom. We don't have the leverage to kind of navigate everybody else that we're also trying to, encourage to go in and take classes and do all this stuff. Like, we need more leverage with all of our assistant teachers, and it just put them in such a hard spot looking center wide to focus on this one teacher. So just to say, it gets complicated. And we're working as much as we can with centers and really listening to that, capturing all of that. Another thing just to throw out there, we wrote into the report, and it's the right thing to do, that our local funding is always used last. So if the state says, hey, we want to, we're going to give some extra money to NC pre-K here in I think the money is coming in January or something. They've added some money to some programs in NC pre-K. I mean, our budget is always flexing, depending on what, when the state has a whim to do this, our budget, like, oh, we have $40,000 more than we thought we had, and now, like, this short term. So it's the right thing to do to make sure that local funds are spent last, but it does provide present challenges. And then this one, I'm going to say more about this later. Head Start as our biggest program, not in any way. Jenny was very clear that all programs are experiencing this challenge, but as far as NC pre-K impacts, and just like Jenny said, programs are still really having trouble recruiting, and less retention, mostly really about recruiting. And so with our NC pre-K numbers, because Head Start is our biggest program, that as you'll see in a few slides, that means that we're not at full enrollment. And it's also the same across the state. But next slide. So just quickly, I'm changing the time here. So the next strategy that I want to talk about briefly is just that second one, if you can click it again, the education and career pipeline. This is when we talk to directors and said, how can we encourage teachers to increase their education, to stay, to really, to dedicate themselves to the profession long term. What a lot of folks said, the word that multiple directors used, and not in an insulting way, but the word that multiple directors used was like, my teachers who are working full time and have jobs and are trying to have kids and families and trying to take classes, I have to do a lot of hand holding to get them to register, to get them to apply for teach, to get them to apply for other grants and things that they might be able to do to get them through that math class if they're doing their AA and some of those general ed things. So we were trying to kind of to address some of that. That word that they used was hand-holding, but really it's what the way we have implemented this is a higher education coach to do some individual coaching on all kinds of things, and also some cohort-focused support, some study sessions that include childcare and things like that. And then some financial supports and other logistical supports as it comes up for folks. Next slide. So one celebration, we have our higher ed coach, Amy McNeil, who started in September and has been recruiting since mid-October. Recruiting will be in much larger force starting with this new, the spring semester. I want to give you another, to have a moment of celebration again. 2 quick examples of what Amy's job looks like and what the impact of her job is. She's recently worked with one teacher, a family child care provider, who has been a family child care provider since 2001 in our community. She's never been eligible for wages because she needed one more class. And these supports and just, and Amy reaching out and saying, hey, I can help, meant that she can enroll in that one class and be eligible for wages and make more money. And then another participant who is actively working on her BK license didn't realize she was eligible for a Pell Grant and wasn't signed up for Teach either, and got both of those. That teacher now actually has all of her educational expenses paid for. She's gonna have a little extra at the end of the semester, and that's huge. So worth celebrating. Next slide. The last strategy that I just want to highlight and give you a little bit of an update on is push the button again, coordinated outreach and enrollment. This is one that this committee actually started funding launched last year, and it's the single portal of entry, right? There's an online application portal right now where families can go and get information about funded pre-K. They can apply for NC Pre-K and Head Start with one application. And we're still working on it, but ideally, lots of magic happens behind the scenes, and we are figuring out ways to simplify the processes and communicate better behind the scenes so the families don't have to navigate different programs and different timelines and different requirements and all that stuff. So if you go to the next slide. So one of the great things about having this single portal of entry, as well as making it easier for families to navigate these systems, is that we have one place where all of our funded pre-K applicant data lives now, which is really, I think is going to be great for this community moving forward. So this is actually a heat map of the applicants for this past year, from their home addresses. So we can see, and not that it's hugely surprising, but we can look at this and really map onto where are the NC Pre-K and Head Start sites, and how are we making sure that, adjusting our outreach strategies, adjusting future site selection, that kind of thing. And then a little bit of the data from our first year with this portal. We had 590 applications in total this year, and that considering where we are in COVID, I think everybody was real happy about that in most ways. We also were able to ask families some more information, and again, across the board, see unduplicated data around the families applying who need transportation, the families applying who have IEPs or have concerns about their child's development, who's applying that is learning English. And this coming year, we actually have a whole series of questions that we're going to ask around transportation, so that we can, because we're going to have some pilot funds to kind of support creative transportation solutions. And we have this portal to kind of be able to do that and work with families and across the board. So yeah, and we're the next year application is launching in January. So that's exciting. Next slide. So this is the what's the impact so far, that as far as we can tell, right? And again, ARPA has just been funded since July. The school system just started in really September. NC Pre-K is currently at 88% of enrollment as of October. The state average at the end of October was 90%. So that's, we're right there. Much higher than we have been in COVID, up to this point. We have added, and that's the piece that I did want to say about that is that is mostly because there are some classrooms that are closed in the NC Pre-K world. Those classrooms happen to be Head Start classrooms because they're such a large portion of our, the NC Pre-K slots. But that 88% is not as much about the demand side as it is about the supply side in most cases. We have this year added 2 more NC Pre-K sites, and the site selection process is opening soon. So we know we're going to have one more site apply, and hopefully another couple who, if they're not ready to apply this year, might be willing to engage in ramp up supports, which is another piece of the ARPA funded project to get programs who are like, I might want to do that, but we got a big learning curve or a big, capacity curve to get there, to get really specific supports to get there, so that next year they would be prepared to be in a slot allocation, and those pieces are happening. Where are the slots? Where are they needed? Where are they now? And then we are hoping at the end of the year that the investments, especially in the lead teacher salaries, will really show up in retention data. As Jenny said, we don't know. There's a lot beyond money right now that is affecting the retention. And again, especially I think more than retention, recruitment. And in our discussion, there are providers here who can speak to that way better than I can. So, and I think that's it. Next slide, I think, just says questions. So,
and I wasn't saying that money isn't important.
Yeah.
That's not the takeaway. The takeaway has to be absolutely high compensation, and we've got to figure out as a community how to keep it at the level it is now without the stabilization grants. So if you got an extra $15 million, be super great. But also there's other pieces.
And I will say one more thing and you can check me on this, but and actually Brian and Marcia and folks might check me on this too. What I think I'm hearing is the turnover, like when there's turnover, it's those newer we have teachers coming in who are pretty new, and as y'all discussed earlier, we have kids who haven't been in care, who've been more isolated than usual for 2 years coming into schools. And so we have kind of, in a lot of cases, the newer teachers might be less prepared. The kids are, more challenging than a classroom would have been 3 years ago. And it's those new teachers that are harder to keep. It's not that we're losing a lot of, I won't be too speculative, but yeah, so.
Children are more stressed. Teachers have fewer years of experience. It's a technical term.
So, questions or comments or,
I have a question for Jenny. You mentioned that there was a loss of homes. I read some reports kind of mid-pandemic that indicated they were actually the most flexible nationwide. So I was just curious about what happened in Buncombe County.
It's not real for us. It's not related to the pandemic,
okay,
at all. It's been historical. It's been happening for a long time, and it's partly that. So I came into the field actually as a family child care provider, kind of accidentally, right? And but program, I was able to charge more when I closed in 2007 than some homes are charging now. So like costs, like what people are able to charge is not going up, but we know cost of living in Buncombe County is going up. You know, there's no flexibility in terms of number of children that you can serve. What else? And also the state continues to add, which is good, right? Like, please have good oversight. But when you talk to some of the kind of the very experienced family child care providers, they're like, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it, right? So if they can figure out how to maybe keep 2 children and not have to be licensed, they're going to do it because there's a lot happening. Also, the crisis itself. Right, our lack of infant and toddler slots itself has created a market where, you know, when I was licensed in 2003 as a family child care provider, the only way I was going to get children was if I was licensed and on the referral list, and my name was on the thing, right? I mean, on the list of licensed providers, the only way that you were going to get families. But now, I mean, and I hate to say it, but right now the kind of illegal childcare home market is huge and families don't have any other options, right? And so whereas 15 years ago, families really wanted to know if it was legal, if it was licensed. Now they're like, you seem really nice. Please keep my baby. And those people can charge the same amount that a licensed home can without the drama. So as you know, we're really actively working on it, but I mean, it's been hard. We've had a grant some way, shape, or form for years to be able to give startup funds, and we've had a very hard time giving it away because people are just like, why would I become licensed when I'm already making the money over here? And that's happening across the state. But in places like Buncombe, where we have a high cost of living and even fewer infant toddler slots, it's really that you don't need a license anymore to be able to serve families, which is both good. And as a parent, right, it's like, good, I could find somebody, I could find care, but as a system, means they can't take vouchers, it means all these things.
Oh, wow, that's an area that we need to focus on, I agree.
This is great to get this data, and also great to get to kind of note and celebrate some of the real progress. As you all are talking with counties like Durham, Forsyth, Meck, some of the other counties in North Carolina that are really working with the needle on this, are they seeing similar trends in terms of overall lower enrollment and some of the workforce related challenges? And the second part of that question is, are you hearing about any sort of breakthrough strategies that seem to be reversing those trends or helping solve for some of the workforce challenges?
So one of the cool things that has actually happened since we got this ARPA funding is every other month, I guess, there's actually now a community of practice of folks who are working on locally funded pre-K initiatives. So we meet every other month with Durham and Mecklenburg and Forsyth and Wake. Those are the folks that are currently there, and I think Chatham may be a future participant. And we had a whole conversation. Our last conversation was about transportation and wraparound, which is the other 2 areas of family barriers that we want to focus on, and everybody else on other communities' radar. And honestly, when we asked that question at the community of practice, what are folks doing around transportation and wraparound, all the other communities said, well, you know, we issued a report, but the staffing is so dire now, we're not even trying, because both, you know, I mean, you've seen news stories about the K-12 bus drivers and stuff like that. Like, both of these things are kind of hard to staff, largely part-time, you know, jobs if you're looking at providing transportation or wraparound care, after school care, which was such a despairing conversation. But no, like the other programs, I mean, there are some programs, Stacey might know more about, there are some programs who are fully funded or who are that are fully enrolled across the county, but it's, you know, it's, everybody is experiencing staffing challenges. And I don't know that I don't know, is there a great solution that somebody's come up with?
No, it's, I mean, right, I think in the same way that we've lost teachers little bit by bit by bit, it's, that name, Amy varies one time, so it's like, what's the silver buckshot, right? Because there's not a silver bullet, there's like a bunch of little things, and I think she was quoting someone else, but I don't remember who it was. But it's that, right? It's like where we've seen some good movement is programs that have some flexibility, right? So they figured out how to offer free or very, very, very reduced childcare for their own staff, right? So they can use that as a recruitment tool. It's programs that have figured out how to cover health insurance for a whole family, right? For at a affordable rate, and keep co-pays low, right? It's programs. It's also, I'm thinking about teachers that I've heard that are just like, they're staying even when it's hard. And it's about, I hate to it's about community, right? It's about like, how does the leadership at the program make them feel? How do they feel when they show up every day? Because there was a big piece, early on in the pandemic where everybody was talking about teachers, right? Talking about things like that, right? Like they felt like, yes, like I'm the hero, I'm coming to work every day, everybody's at home, but I'm doing my job because this is my job. And that is gone. They do not feel that, right? And we know, right, that in general, society does not value our educators the way that we should. And it's the programs who are keeping teachers are the ones that have figured out how to make them feel that all the time, right? Whether that's, I mean, sometimes it's just as simple as like, if I need to go to the bathroom or go call my doctor, somebody's gonna step in, right? Like I can, whatever, I can take an afternoon off and pick up my kid if I need to, or it's some of those things that aren't really quantifiable and are in some ways not fundable, right? But it's kind of valuing how do we build that? And not to say that we can't, because you're right, actually it is fundable. It's just looking at the whole system and how much money is coming into it. So therefore, where does that create some flexibility for programs? So yeah, but it's like one person at a time.
One thing that's striking to me is, I mean, the story y'all are telling today is a really different story than we've gotten to hear in past years. For years and years and years, it was, here's another report documenting the same cycle. And do we start with teacher pay or do we expand classrooms? And I feel like bit by bit, the story is shifting here. Teacher pay just for NC pre-K teachers, at least, just moved significantly under this program. And the stories of the work that you're doing around the higher ed piece. So it feels like, as we sort of like take the plane up for a second, that part of the story, I'm trying to think of the succinct way to say this, but it's that impactful, powerful things are happening at the central level, at the level of individual classrooms, individual teachers. Our challenge is, how do we scale and or systematize those so that we can do this with enough force to move some of these trends. So we have the sort of this, I mean, it's tough. We had at our commission meeting last night, we got some metrics in on most of our resident well-being goals, and they're pretty much all in the red. We're not, I mean, across the board in many of the areas we're working hardest, we're seeing data that is pretty sobering. And at the same time, seeing innovative, impactful strategies that are truly difference making at the individual level. A life saved from an opiate overdose, that someone is rebuilding their life, or a teacher who is getting a $772 raise. So I think part of our work is figuring out how we kind of hold both those things at once, but also figuring out how we're very both disciplined and smart about recognizing what are the things that are actually needle moving, that are replicable and scalable, that can start to reverse some of these trends.
I'm thinking about what Kit said earlier about infants and toddlers, and I think if we're thinking about stress, right? So I mean, it is, some of you have visited programs, right? And this is my life's work, and early childhood programs are a stressful place to be if you're tiny, right? It's just even just from the best classroom and the best days you have, right? So it's thinking about those tiny bodies, right? And then if you take your infants and toddlers, who we know kind of what Anna was saying is that the impact of the rest of the program, right? So the NC pre-K teachers, right, are getting this and have had such great gains, but then the toddler teacher down the road, down the hall, right, is probably the low. I mean, we know, like the data shows that infant toddler teachers are across the board paid way less than preschool teachers, right? Okay, so if you take that teacher who's the lowest paid in the room and you put them with, let's say, I mean, honestly, objectively, the most stressful age, right? They're one, right? Right? I mean, they're great. They're so cute, but it's hard. It's hard work, right? So it's that piece. And so I wonder just kind of what would happen if as a system, we're looking at those younger children, and because then when they hit preschool, do they have more skills and are they more secure? Because the other thing that happens, right, is, attachment, I'm sorry, I'm gonna stand on my little soapbox here, but we know about attachment, right? We know that if it's their teacher that's turning over, right, every 4 months, every 6 months, they've got a new teacher, then suddenly coming to school doesn't feel so great when you're 2, you can't talk about it, you don't know what to say. And so then, yeah, I would bet that, I mean, we fight, right? And then what does it look like when you're 3 and then you're in pre-K and suddenly we're talking about behavior supports? When we're going back to, I mean, I can link most things to teacher turnover, right? So thinking about kind of as the whole system, how are we looking at all of the teachers across the board? And that's how all of these things you all talk about all day long, right? I mean, this whole meeting kind of linked together is the child that's moving between those classrooms and how do they show up at the end and what are the systemic pieces that we need.
Have you seen any gains?
You know, no, go ahead. I didn't want to cut someone off who was speaking in the room.
Sorry, Marcia. I was just going to ask if they had seen any gains from the CTE programs that have begun to be created in the high schools that we have kind of worked on. Has there been any kind of?
Those teachers are, when they come into classrooms, are incredibly well prepared and tend to, once they get in, they stay. One of the things that our workforce development program is working on is connecting with them and getting them and working with them so that maybe they come into our sub pool, maybe they get some extra training over the summer so that we don't lose, because what happens often is they do great work in high school and then they get a summer job and we lose them. So the workforce program has been trying to connect with them and it's had great luck actually pulling them in as subs over winter break, over summer break, so that we're not losing them from the field. Because yes, they are, I mean, well prepared.
Well, thank you so much. I think I've appreciated the level of nuance in this conversation and just the immense amount of work that y'all do. I think as I wanted to kind of piggyback on Jasmine's question about like what is scalable. If there were, I know that there's kind of the intangibles of the directors who are able to build community for their teachers that allows them to retain their staff and make them a little happier but if there were like maybe 1 or 2 mandates that you see from this data for this committee, what would that be, if any?
I mean, I think considering continued compensation supports as kind of the baseline that we can't build anything off of. And I may have a different answer, but I would then go to training, right? What are those teachers getting, right? And looking at attachment and relationships and how that shows up, right? Because we're looking at behavior, and behavior is about relationships and how safe you feel in the room, right? If I'm stressed, I'm going to be mean, whether I'm my age or 2. So what that looks like in the classroom, and also racial equity, right? Looking at how you all started out talking about, right? The studies around teacher bias as not taught, but just we're soaking it, right? As white people, we're soaking it. So how does that show up in the classroom? How can we build racial equity training into our just standard that teachers have to have? That's where I would start.
Yeah, I mean, most of my days are spent focused pretty specifically on NC Pre-K, and the thing that's not explicitly in the ARPA grant, as one of those pretty little boxes up there, is a strategy that is very much an issue. But when we were writing the report and thinking about NC Pre-K capacity and expansion, it's not specific to NC Pre-K in any way, so didn't get into the report. But the other piece that I think is really key to retention and is really essential to what classrooms and kids and teachers need is I don't begin to know what it looks like, but more behavioral support, like both training for teachers and supports for those kids. I mean, I had a friend the other day who was talking about a little guy that is, I have a friend who works, this is a half day program. It's not even a licensed program. But she was saying, we have this program. We have never in the history of this program, it's been around a really long time, expelled a child. And and they have 3 teachers in every classroom, right? Which is it's required more than NC Pre-K classrooms have usually. And they have this little guy who, the other children are in danger. Like a couple of days ago, he took a whole box of scissors and threw it up into the air, and scissors like flew everywhere in the classroom, right? And so, again, back to what Mark was saying, it is never developmentally appropriate to expel a pre-K child, but at the same time, when you're the teacher and other kids are going home hurt or scared, or, and multiple parents are coming in saying, oh, my child is in danger, get this kid out or I'm leaving. And the teacher comes in and says, you don't give me help with this kid, I'm leaving because I don't know what else to do. The child, there's a, whether it gets classified as an expulsion or the parents decide that their needs aren't getting met. And, those conversations get really mushy sometimes about what's an expulsion. I think there are lots of things that are kind of 90% expulsion that wouldn't get counted as an expulsion, because the conversation is we've tried everything and we can't meet your child's needs. In our community, there's no way, like that little boy who threw the scissors, he's leaving in January, or he's in the program through December. There's nowhere for him to go.
Can I jump off?
Yeah,
of that?
Sure.
This is
Just quick time check.
Yes.
We have probably about 2 more minutes for this before we transition into public comment and final announcements.
Oh, super fast. This is another impact of our workforce problem. Our workforce struggles right now, right? Is a director who I think a couple of years ago might say, hey, we're actually going to work with this child and we're going to keep going and we're going to support them. That director does not want to lose that teacher. So we're seeing more children than ever being asked to leave. And again, we don't have to, because they want to keep the teachers, which I get. The other piece is, as a system nationally, we don't actually have expulsion data that is system-wide, because the only programs that are required to keep it are federally and state-funded programs like NC Pre-K and Head Start and Early Head Start, which technically aren't really supposed to be expelling children anyway. So any expulsion data you have seen is actually a million times worse than you've actually read, because private programs don't report it anywhere and they're expelling children all the time. Sorry to end on that note. But it's an awful way to end, but really.
Any closing comments from the committee?
Yeah, Jasmine, this is Susan. On the thing and chat. I probably can't go into, too many details, but I will say that through the RFP work that Dogwood's doing through our education focused on early childhood, we have the landscape study, and then based on that, I will tell you that there are really a lot of exciting ideas that Dogwood that we're able to fund that are going to be coming out. And I think some of them are linked to what's happening in other parts of the state, like you were talking about. Some are related to the data we're seeing. And I know that the Buncombe County Partnership is heavily involved in that work as well. So I think there are a lot of things that are coming that are related to this conversation, and it may be work down the road trying to think about how we can link that. That's 18 countywide. In this, we're focused on Buncombe, but I just wanted to point that out.
Thanks for sharing that, Susan. That sounds like great news in the pipeline. And we'll just reiterate our tremendous thanks to the whole partnership team for the work you all do every day, and then taking the time to pull together a presentation like this and kind of keep us abreast of what's happening at the system level, the community level. And we'll look forward already to the next time that you're back, so we can kind of keep tracking sort of how these stories are moving and how the data is moving. And just really, really appreciate doing this work, and I'm sure there will be follow-up questions both from committee members and then committee members who weren't here today. So maybe we can share those with staff. You could share them with y'all as they come in.
Certainly, and Buncombe Partnership for Children reports to us monthly on the federally funded NC Pre-K expansion program. So we've got workbooks and loads of information. If you're ever curious about taking a deeper dive, just contact us.
Great. In the last few minutes of the meeting, we'll start first with announcements about any upcoming events or anything folks want the committee to be aware of or the committee to be aware of.
Between now and the next meeting, our grant cycle will open. So we will send you a notification and encourage you to share that information with your networks.
Great. And public comment. We have two folks signed up, Pepe and then Brian. You each have 3 minutes. You're welcome to make your comment from where you are, or you're welcome to join us at the podium, whatever you prefer. And I will be timekeeper and let you know as you get close to 3 minutes.
What's this?
Whatever you're welcome to take the podium if you like.
That helps if people from home hear better. That's the microphone. Picks it up.
Great. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you. My name is Pepe Acebo. As some of you know, I ran for school board and was about 200 votes short, but there's always next time. But I keep an eye on what all of you are doing and what you're funding. And for me, looking at achievement gaps, testing gaps, everything that is top of mind for Asheville City Schools, the biggest thing that I think that the county commissioners can do to help and the community can do to help is to close our access gap for early childhood education. Since 2001, No Child Left Behind, we've pushed the early literacy standards from first grade into kindergarten. You folks all know this, and we're expecting kindergartners that first week to be able to sit still for literacy instruction. And the only way that they're possibly going to be able to handle emotionally, behaviorally, the push down of academics is for us to bring early childhood education to as many families who are willing to permit it and to participate as possible. So just a big thank you from me and on behalf of voters and residents and everybody, just thank you all for doing what you do.
Right?
I'll stand here and talk loud if that's okay. I wanted to, first of all, I wanted to follow up with one of the comments that were made today. Head Start and NC Pre-K have pretty strict guidelines around around suspension and expulsion. And so, we really work with families, with the teachers. We put a lot of supports in those classrooms, but we see a lot of children having behavior challenges, mental health issues. My concern is that I think we're going to see that really increasing over the next year or two before it starts decreasing, hopefully, because of the pandemic and the social isolation that we see with families these days. The other thing I want to thank the committee and the commissioners and staff, we were able to give raises for a lot of our teaching staff. We have some teaching staff that have 30 years of experience on their license. They're making over $36 an hour. We took all of our staff to $15 a minimum, our teachers with AAs to $16.28 over that $15.80 requirement. So hopefully we can recruit more staff. But one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to churn staff internally within Buncombe County. We want to be able to recruit people to come into Buncombe County, and we want to be able to grow our own from Head Start parents and or from the community. The other thing I wanted to talk about, just the hiring. I shared some information with the site visit committee, or the site visit folks who came to visit us, and that from July 1 through October 15th, we went through 166 applications and hired 11 staff. So a 6% success rate on that piece. But one of the neat things was that we had about 42% that we had no response from. And Carol gave a suggestion on what they do at her work, which was to use texting instead of just email and calling. And so last time we went through a round a couple weeks ago, we had out of 15 calls, we had one contact. I was like, let's see if I can text them. Let's try that out. And we had 5 additional contacts through texting. So that's just one of the little things where you never know where a difference is going to be made. And the experience of the committee and the different committee members hopefully will help us out. I just want to thank everyone here and thank Carol specifically for her suggestion. And thank you all for all the work that you do everywhere.
Thanks, Brian. Text, people like a text. Awesome. Just a reminder that we will not have a meeting in January. And that's right, Rachel, because January's focus is the workshops, right?
Yep, we will invite you to attend and participate in the workshop for applicants if you're interested.
But we will be back in February. For those who are new to the committee, buckle up. February to April is when the roller coaster takes off and things start moving fast. Our staff does an incredible job both supporting the grantee side, but also supporting the committee in the process of reviewing applications and getting through a decision-making process. It is a more streamlined process each year that we do it. I'll never forget year 1. I think that was a wild west of grant making. I think luckily Rachel stayed with us past that point. But it'll be another exciting cycle, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone. But between now and then, wishes to everyone for a wonderful holiday season, however you celebrate, and hopefully lots of rest. And our biggest gratitude for all the incredible work represented in this room. And we are adjourned. Bye to everyone online.